Wayne Stables ha lavorato nell'industria degli effetti visivi per oltre 15 anni ed ha appena finito di lavorare al primo film di animazione di Steven Spielberg, Le avventure di Tintin. Wayne ha cominciato a lavorare con la Weta Digital nel 1994 e nel suo curriculum ci sono molti progetti come Sospesi nel tempo, Contact, la trilogia del Signore degli Anelli ed Avatar. Per ultimo, ha sviluppato le pipeline per l'illuminazione ed il rendering utilizzate durante tutto il film. Alla View Conference presenta Le avventure di Tintin e la tecnologia di registrazione in live action usata nel film.
The performance capture techniques that we use on Tintin, which we originally used on Avatar and we've since extended on, is really a way of extending traditional motion capture. Originally with motion capture, we were more worried with the body, with the limbs, with the arms, not so much with the face. With performance capture, what we do is we put markers on the face, on the 12 major muscle groups, and there's a camera that comes off a head rig for the actor. And that camera records and tracks all of those facial markers as well. So from that, what we can now do is we can now capture the actor's facial performance that they actually give. In fact, that's where it's now changed. It's not so much just the motion, but the performance as well. Even the way the eyes move, the eyebrows, the cheeks, smiles, everything now gets captured. Some of the biggest differences between like the graphic, the way in which perhaps Hergé drew Tintin and the way in which we have to render him inside 3D is we have, one of the biggest differences is what happens with the camera inside a film. When you look at the Tintin albums, most of the characters, like Tintin, Snowy, Haddock, they're often drawn from similar angles, and in fact Hergé would even cheat them for composition inside the panels. We couldn't do that because we have to move our camera around and see them from all sorts of angles. He also didn't have to consider lighting, which we have to do, so he could draw Tintin in a very simple fashion. You know, Tintin is basically a balloon with a little nose and two black eyes and a little mouth. And if you try to, and a lot of his expressions and a lot of his emotions are drawn as, you know, exclamation marks or beads of sweat coming off him. Because we had to actually give our character emotion, we had to make his face a lot more complicated so that we could read the emotions and we could read his performance, and also so that we could light him and fit him into a much more realistic. We had a lot of reference from Hergé that we would use. We would always go back to the panels, and we would use those as our starting point. This is, we would, if we didn't have good panel reference, we would at least look at perhaps the locations or the type of cars that he may have drawn. We would find our own reference for that. Some of the more difficult reference and research that we had to do were some of the locations that weren't real, places like Bagar, where he only drew a few panels, but a lot of our movie takes place in. So what we had to do is we had to find other towns in North Africa and in Morocco that were very similar, that we knew he'd drawn his inspiration from, and we had to flesh out and build out his world from there. In order to, well, I guess for us to make the audience feel like they still understood and they could still recognize the comic book world of Tintin inside our movie, what we did is we used the same items like cars, buildings, locations, aeroplanes, dressing, vases, tables, Tintin's apartment. Everything is taken from the books. The proportions, the sizes of them, the shapes of those buildings are all out of the books. What we did is we added detail to them. So if he had a plain brown table, we made sure that it looked like a beaten up wooden table. The outsides of the buildings outside, we aged and made to feel like they were European buildings, you know, bits of plaster on them and stains and things like that. So what we did is we really took his artwork as our outline, and we just painted more into it, and we added smoke, and we just brought it to life. The main difference, the way in which technology's changed from the movies that I've worked on, from Lord of the Rings through Avatar, through to now Tintin, is that a lot of our visual effects work used to be involved with putting a creature or a monster into a background, or just adding a little bit of computer generated, characters or something into it. How we've evolved over time is a lot of our films now have just become much more complicated. We do so much more in CG. A good example, between Lord of the Rings and Avatar, most of the sets in Lord of the Rings in the first films were physical sets. In Avatar, of course, the whole jungle and everything was computer generated, but there were still some sets. And now in Tintin, everything is generated. So the locations are a big thing that's grown. The other thing that's grown a lot is crowds or extras. In Lord of the Rings, they were fairly simple. In Avatar, you added a few more, a lot more Na'vi in the background. And now in Tintin, we have Tintin walking through the markets of Bagar, and he's surrounded by street sellers, and they have to all look at the same level as what he does.